Alleluia, alleluia, alleluia. Alleluia, alleluia, alleluia. Stand up, raise your hands, for your redemption is at hand. Alleluia, alleluia, alleluia. May Christ be with you. A reading from the Good News according to the book of Luke. Glory to you.
Glory to you, O Christ.
Some disciples were speaking of how the temple was adorned with precious stones and votive offerings. Jesus said, "You see all these things? The day will come when not one stone will be left on another. Everything will be torn down." They asked, "When will this happen, Rabbi? And what will be the sign of it, that it is about to happen?" Jesus said, "Take care not to be misled. Many will come in my name, saying, 'I am the one,' and the time is at hand. Do not follow them. And do not be perturbed when you hear of wars and insurrections. These things must happen first, but the end does not follow immediately." Then he said to them, "Nation will rise against nation, and empire against empire. There will be great earthquakes, plagues, and famines in various places. And in the sky there will be frightening omens and great signs. But before all of this, they will arrest you and persecute you, bringing you to trial before synagogues and sending you to prison, and bringing you to trial before rulers and governors. And it will all be because of my name. And this will be your opportunity to give your testimony. So make up your minds not to worry about your defense beforehand, for I will give you the words and a wisdom that none of your adversaries can take exception to or contradict. You will be betrayed even by your parents, brothers, sisters, relatives, and friends. And some of you will be put to death. Everyone will hate you because of me, yet not a hair of your head will be harmed. By patient endurance, you will save your lives. This is the gospel of Christ.
Praise to you, O Christ.
I find it ironic, this is the second time I've preached this set of readings since our nation changed its overt direction and showed some unfortunate parts of its undersides. And here we are again. So, first of all, there's this running joke about Mears' abridged explanation in the books of the Bible. And in that, my summary of Malachi is bad Israel daddy spank. We certainly see that in our first glance at this reading in Malachi 4. But this one's an interesting one. It makes me think of Matthew 5:45, where it says that God makes the sun rise on both the evil and the good. It made me realize that this day in Malachi simultaneously burns up the works and assets of the arrogant and the evildoers, leaving neither root nor branch. And at the same time, with the same sun, shines healing justice for those who revere God. Now, me personally, I'd rather be all reaching leaves among sweet water and others reaching to drink in the light than be sharp-edged crystal swords or grasping claws among other sharp swords and grasping claws who cast only melting laser rays and moving shadows. That's how to be renewed and healed by the sun and not burned. To be close to fellow reachers for, not splinterers of, the light. I think of those who gave themselves believing they were standing with fellow reachers and protectors of the light through time and through many means of combating darkness. including many in the military of the nations who've been honoring Remembrance Day this weekend. The 2 Thessalonians 3 is probably Paul's strongest statement about his tent maker philosophy. Paul actually went from place to place, and he took care of his own needs. The pretty early and probable lore is that he actually made black goat hair tents. And so those who are ministers and earn their own living are still called tent makers. And most ECC clergy are living this path. Although I have to admit, my best research and reflection time is after I recover from the school year in July and before I jump back in at mid-August. So maybe this works better if you're a blue-collar type. I can imagine Paul stitching and cutting while he taught. And I think I'd actually enjoy that based on me teaching archery and the talks that I've had over art and service projects. I kind of like that mental image. But Paul's point is that they weren't freeloaders surfing on the community, even though they could have argued that, hey, we're doing the brain work here, you ought to just cover for us. He wanted to make it clear that they were there to serve and that the message was so compelling that it in and of itself is enough recompense for sharing it. And I also think it makes clear that there is no part of our path that says that we get to sit back and enjoy Christian TV. Christianity is a thing that we do. We don't watch other people's struggles and learnings and service. We have to be struggling and learning and serving. So he tells the Thessalonians to imitate them, working their fair share and more, being disciplined, contributing to a whole that's worth building because the whole is building it. And then he contrasts this work refusal while gossiping to cut other people down with working, keeping your mouth shut about other people's problems. And I have a student who's really significantly deaf, and he has an interpreter. And his interpreter says that the sign for talking a lot is this. It's literally the flapping tongue in the mouth. And if that isn't a mental image, and so again, I think of my military uprising, and I think about my friends who insist on virtue non verbis, deeds not words. Live it, don't just talk about it. And then Psalm 17 is one of my favorite anthems in the compline service. Keep me as the apple of an eye. Hide me under the shadow of thy wings. As for me and my justice, I will see your face and be filled. When I awake with the sight of your glory. This is another two-sided one that I've been aware of for a long time. Is your life one where coming face to face with God is going to make you filled? It's going to bring you joy? Or is that going to be an, oh, crap? When you come face to face with Aslan, is it a good thing? Is it a known face, a reassuring face, or a most fearsome one because you've been hiding from it? And that leads us to the Luke passage. And Jesus said, take care not to be misled. Many will come in my name, saying, I'm the one, the time is at hand. Do not be perturbed when you hear of wars and insurrections, plagues and famines. earthquakes, the sky with frightening omens. So this is the end passage. And there's a lot of texts in the Tanakh and in Apocrypha stuff out there, the traumatic end times worries, fears of people who see the world crashing down around them. They speak to the human experience. When we have personal apocalypses, we have community apocalypses and national and regional ones. And it all feels like everything's falling apart. It feels like the end of the world. Each time it feels like the end of the world. And in that time, those of us who have this apocalyptic literature wonder if it's that time, the time. But for the person in the middle of it, isn't it that time and the time anyway? The funny thing is that truly apocalyptic literature is the person taken out of everything crashing down to give a prophecy about it. It's that being caught up in a wave vision is the apocalypse. So we need to call it a Ragnarok or Armageddon or something else situation. But we've ended up with them conflated in our language. But I want us to put that too in context of our teaching about the kingdom. In the same way that we're trying to bring the kingdom of love every day in big things and small, let's acknowledge that worlds big and small begin, end, and are transformed into love daily. And in those moments, we can choose to contribute to their course and result and bring about the kingdom of love in those big, small, and in between things that happen daily and within our reach. And some of them are really big. We're seeing the rise of fascism around the globe. There's certainly big stuff. And in those moments, big or small, it is our calling to see those moments, take those actions, do our faith, and be the hands and lips of living love. The reading goes on and warns that there's a cost of being the living gospel in a time of conflicted, panicky apocalypse. That they have a tendency to arrest you and cut you out and swat you and do all kinds of things when you give a risk to a panicky group of people who are trying to avert an apocalypse. And that's actually when it's essential that we handle these trials with our hands and our heads and our hearts full of God. Because that's the testimony we need to confront this panicky conflict and condemnation that's based on all these irrational fears. We see a small version on a large scale today, don't we? But I tell you, make up your minds not to worry about your defense beforehand, because I will give you the words and a wisdom that none of your adversaries can overtop. I was actually taught that the reason that we learn all these scriptures and all these songs and all these hymns when life's okay is so that they're there for our brains to reach out for when it's totally not okay. And you need those words to come at you in your darkness when you can't read. That they're there to come to mind and light your path. And frankly, I remember saying this 3 years ago, that we're watching being betrayed by our parents, the brothers, sisters, relatives, and friends. And at this point, we're watching people dying. And there's this conflicting statement here. People are being put to death, and yet not a hair of your head will be harmed. By patient endurance, you will save your lives. So this trying time will come, and for a lot of our women and a lot of our trans people has come. And we know that prophets get driven out and killed. And we're struck with this contrast. And yet not a hair of your head will be harmed. And that leaves me with a little bit of metaphysical thought about which outcome harms who you really are. Your real self, your real body, that body of resurrection. Which outcome will harm you, really? Which self-portrait do you want to give to those around you to try to build the kingdom? And I think that's the only way that I can make sense of this passage. Is that, yeah, belief's gotten real all over the place. But being true to who we are is the best way to protect who we are. And I know that I'm leaving you with some heavy meditations on some pretty heavy readings. And I find that also appropriate on Armistice Day, or on the Sunday closest to it. That having done all we can, we stand. Because sometimes that's all we know how to do. And I welcome your thoughts.